The people that want to be in Artist Alley are in Artist Alley, and you get no one else. So you're not getting the people that are there for celebrity photos and this and that, finding their way through Artist Alley and saying the thing I always hate hearing, which is, hey, do you read comics? And they say, no, I don't read comics. And it's like, why are you looking at the comics and walking by all of us if this is of no interest to you? Hello and welcome to Pesto Comics. This is the entry for October 22nd, 2025. Con Journal, New York Comic Con, lost in the eye of the storm. Welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Adriano. I'm a comic book writer and letterer and crowdfunder overall. I do it all under the name Pesto Comics, and you can find me online very easily at pestocomics.com or at Pesto Comics on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Blue Sky, and whatever else might be coming out in the future. And of course on YouTube if you're not watching me there already. Plus, we have a Substack, pestocomics.substack.com. Very easy to find us. However you happen to be finding us today, I really appreciate you being here. One thing I love to do is to go to comic conventions. I've been going for a couple decades now, but over the past 3 years, I've really ramped it up, and I've been going all over North America, and with one stop in the UK as I went to Thought Bubble last year. I was lucky enough to have a table there, and it's still one of my favorites, and I can't wait to go back. But I always like to try new places, and this time I went to New York Comic Con. This is my first time going, and I was getting a little bit concerned in the week leading up to it, watching the weather forecast, as it looked like a big storm, a nor'easter, was actually coming and going to hit New York on the same weekend of New York Comic Con. Most of the weekend was dry, or at least when it did rain, it was while we were in the convention itself, so it worked out pretty well. That said, it didn't all go perfectly. My flight was canceled. I happened to get on an earlier one, but it did shorten my weekend a little bit more than I had hoped. But I'm much happier having made it home safely than having to stay in New York for a couple extra days because I wanted to get another hour or two in at the convention floor. Today I want to go through all of it. The good, the bad, what I picked up, and if I'll ever find myself back there again. Without further ado, let's get into it, starting with the good. One of the best moments of going to any convention is the first time that you see the show floor. It's really a magical moment as you don't know exactly what to expect, and New York Comic Con did not disappoint. My local show, Fan Expo Canada, is laid out a little bit differently, where when you walk onto the show floor, you're immediately greeted either by Artist Alley or by a bunch of comic vendors. I appreciate that as a comic person myself, but it definitely doesn't have the same magic as when you walk into New York Comic Con or even San Diego and you get these giant displays and you really feel like you're almost at like a comic book theme park. Like you really do feel like you are transported somewhere special, somewhere that is celebrating the things you love, and so is everyone around you. It's really the big feeling of that communal experience where Fan Expo always feels a little bit more like you're going into the market. It's still good in a way. It's still great to meet friends and see people that I haven't seen at the Artist Alley or to pick up some deals at the vendors there. But it definitely does feel a little more transactional, where when you go to New York Comic Con or you go to San Diego, it really does feel like you're being brought into an experience. The other thing that New York and San Diego both do very well is the panels. Unsurprisingly, they're able to get some very big names for a lot of their panels and debut a lot of things. Given that a lot of studios are in New York or LA, they're able to get a lot of big names to do some really cool panels that would never happen at Fan Expo or any of these smaller shows that I've been to. It's something that is exclusive to either New York or San Diego, but New York was stacked end to end to the point that you had to really pick and choose which panels you wanted to go to because you were certainly going to miss something huge. The other big thing was I was only there on Saturday and Sunday, so I actually missed out on more of the craft type panels that I would go to at a fan expo, where I would be learning more about writing and talking to authors and talking to comic book writers and all that kind of stuff. That seemed to be reserved more for the Thursday and Friday, which I wasn't there for. So Saturday and Sunday was all the blockbuster announcements and the previews for movies and TV shows and all that kind of stuff. And I had a lot of fun. Again, it's something I don't necessarily get to see too much at our convention in Canada. So I really had a good time. And the panels were absolutely worth the price of admission. The other thing I loved about it was the reservation system. So being able to sit at my desk, the desk I'm sitting at and talking to you at right now, I was able to book all of the panels that I wanted to go to. So I wasn't forced to wait in a standby line for the bigger panels in the main hall. I was able to reserve it and I knew when I needed to be there. And although there was still a queue, usually about a half an hour beforehand, if you wanted to get a decent seat, I didn't have to be there an hour plus beforehand just to get into the room. I knew that I had a seat, and it was just a matter of how close did I necessarily want to be and how much time did I want to spend in line. So the reservation system, I have no complaints. It worked out really well, and the panels, top notch. A lot of fun. One thing I didn't get to do as much of here as I do at other conventions, but still got a little bit, was get to meet up with people. I mentioned at Word on the Street, a lot of that was networking. That was the highlight of Word on the Street. New York Comic Con was less so. I didn't get to run into nearly as many people. Fortunately, James Ferguson, who wrote A Real Slobberknocker and has an excellent Substack at jamesfergcomics.substack.com. I'll put that up there so you can find it. James was cool enough to actually reach out and make sure that we connected. So we were actually both in line for the Marvel Next Big Thing panel, and I happened to come in a little later. He saved me a seat, but I was way too late to get it by the time that I actually got into the room. I ended up hugging the wall and watching things from the floor at times and sometimes standing, but it was a good panel. There's a lot about the Ultimate Universe coming to an end and all the plans that are built in with that. But more importantly, once the panel ended, I was able to chill outside and meet up with James, which was really cool. It was great to meet him in person. We've talked a lot online through Substack. He was a guest on the Instant Ink comic book podcast, which I highly recommend. And I'll put a link for that if you want to check out his episodes. But James is an awesome guy. He has a huge history in comics as a journalist, and now he has an awesome comic himself. So it was great to actually meet him in person. And we said bye about 3 times on the way out. I kind of regret I did not have the energy that day, and that's something I'll be speaking about in a moment. But normally I could be a little more snappy. I have a lot more to say, but I just felt really drained. And as much as I was trying to keep the conversation going, I was struggling. I was really, I was feeling it by the end of the day there with just a couple hours sleep. But James, if you're reading this or watching or listening, I appreciate you being there. Thanks for reaching out. It was good to see a familiar face in person for the first time. So that was a lot of fun. And then on Sunday morning, I met a whole new group of people with the Black Jacket Club. This is Scott Snyder's private course that he does. And at New York Comic Con in San Diego, he does a breakfast. So this one was at the top of the Doubletree in Times Square. So I got to chat with a bunch of people. And although I remember most of your names, I'm not going to risk calling you all out because I'm certainly going to miss someone, and I'd hate to do that. So I'm going to be fair, and I'm just going to say nobody's names. But everybody that I met at the Black Jacket Club breakfast, I had a great time. It was great conversations all across the board. We talked about all kinds of things, and not just comics, which, after a whole weekend of comics, it was nice to just level with people and just talk about life in general for once. So let's talk about where I didn't always have such a great time, specifically at New York Comic Con and the city of New York in general. So let's cover all that with the bad. It's stupidly crowded. And I come from Toronto. Like, we are a crowded city. People talk about traffic in Los Angeles, and they have no idea. It is worse here. I can say that as a matter of fact. It is worse to get around the city of Toronto than it is to get around Los Angeles. It's not as though Fan Expo or even San Diego doesn't get similarly crowded where you just can't walk around. You're bumping into everybody shoulder to shoulder. I don't know what it was about New York Comic Con specifically. It was so packed. And everyone I did speak to there said it was a little more packed than usual. So I don't know exactly what happened. And I know Saturday specifically is the worst possible day to go in terms of any convention. It's always the busiest day. But it just felt a lot more crammed than any con I've been to. Maybe it was the way things were spaced out. Maybe it was all the cosplayers that were continually stopping in the middle of flows of traffic, which usually they're better at finding a corner or finding a side to take a picture. Here it felt like they were doing it at the tops of stairs, the tops of escalators, right in the middle of main thoroughfares, which gums up everything end to end. The other thing was the way the comics were treated. So I mentioned in San Diego, it was kind of weird because there was the small press area, the artist alley area, and then there was the pro area, and all the comics people were kind of spread across the floor. And I thought that was strange, and I didn't know if I liked it. And now I've been to New York, and I've seen a different version of that, where they took all of the comics people and they shoved them into a corner. That was the bigger publishers. So that was DC, and Marvel was more in the middle, but nonetheless, you had Mad Cave and IDW and all them. They're all in the back corner of the convention, which was kind of strange, but also a bit of a pain because you had to get through all the anime people and the cosplayers and all that just to get to the comics at Comic-Con, which is something I'm always going to repeat. It's always a little bit frustrating that it's not treated with a little more respect. Although there was a sign saying, hey, you're here for comics, go this way. At least they acknowledged that, hey, people at Comic-Con might want to see comics. It still felt like they were a bit of an afterthought. Nothing more than actually the artist alley, which was nowhere near the main floor. A totally separate space, totally separate area. And I didn't feel good about it at first. And then talking to James Ferguson, he actually mentioned, it makes a lot more sense because the people that want to be in Artist Alley are in Artist Alley and you get no one else. So you're not getting the people that are there for celebrity photos and this and that, finding their way through Artist Alley and saying the thing I always hate hearing, which is, "Hey, do you read comics?" And they say, "No, I don't read comics." And it's like, why are you looking at the comics and walking by all of us if this is of no interest to you? So he actually sold me on it. Even reliving my own experience that, yeah, a lot of times at these shows, it's people that aren't there for comics. They're just walking through Artist Alley to get somewhere else. If you're in Artist Alley, you're there because you want to be there. There's no other reason to be in that space unless you intend to be there. So I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. And maybe it's something that could work elsewhere. I don't know. But something that doesn't actually have to do with the convention itself, but the location of the convention, New York City. New York is so damn expensive. So again, I live in Toronto. I live in a city that is arguably more expensive than other places in the country, but the fee you pay for being in Manhattan, even with a Starbucks coffee, is ridiculous. Why is it that if I'm on one side of the river, it's one price, and if I'm on the other, it's another? I was staying in New Jersey, so I made sure on Sunday to get my Starbucks in New Jersey, and I saved myself like 250 by doing so, which in Canadian is like $4. So I saved myself a bunch of money by just not buying it in Manhattan. It's absolutely insane. The reason I was staying in New Jersey was because I could not touch hotels in Manhattan. And it's not like I waited to book a hotel. I was ready to book a hotel way in advance. I was even using the tools that New York Comic Con provides to get you a hotel for a little bit cheaper. And that little bit cheaper is not cheaper. So even though you hear all these horror stories about San Diego and people taking advantage and really skyrocketing prices on hotels, it does not touch what was happening with prices in New York just for being New York. Like, it had nothing to do with Comic Con. San Diego's doing it to the Comic Con people, and yet I found prices that were a lot more affordable for hotels. Yes, they weren't walking distance. I had to take the shuttle to get to the convention center, but I was staying in New Jersey. I had to take a bus, and then the bus left me on the highway, and I had to take a lift the rest of the way to my hotel. So that was not better. A shuttle would have been wonderful. So yeah, New York, just what a mess. What a mess in terms of costs and expenses and all that. I love the city. I love going. It's a great place. I've been to the city dozens of times. I know my way around pretty well now, and I'm pretty comfortable with all of it. But my goodness, is it ever expensive? And it seems to be more expensive than ever. So it's something that I always have to think about. I don't know if that was because of Indigenous Peoples Day on the weekend and they treated it like it was a long weekend, or because they knew the Comic Con crowd was going to be there, or what it was exactly. But my goodness, the hotels are more expensive than I had seen in a long time. And I usually stay in New Jersey. There's a bus that takes me right to Times Square, and from there I can get all over wherever I need to go. So I'm usually fine with that, but even that became prohibitive that I had to go to a hotel that I'm not used to, and the hotel that I'm not used to was off of the highway. Anyways, the whole thing, very expensive. Definitely something I have to consider if I ever go back. And the other thing that has nothing to do with the convention, nothing to do with New York City, has to do with me personally. So that, man, I'm starting to feel my age. So I flew in the morning of the show. I was at the airport at 4:30 in the morning. I have a Nexus, so I was able to fly through security as normal, but my flight left at 6, meaning that it boarded at 5:30. So I had to be there at 4:30, and that was me risking it. I knew that it was early enough in the morning that I'd be able to fly through customs, which I did. But the idea of just having to even be up at 4:30 and knowing that the night before, meaning I didn't fall asleep till 1:30. So I'm walking on 2 hours, 3 hours max sleep. The flight wasn't long enough to get much of a rest because we go up and down. Or in Toronto, it's an hour, 20-minute flight, hour, 40 minutes when there's bad weather. So I didn't get much rest at all. And I felt it by the end of the day. I was miserable. So actually, as soon as the show ended on Saturday, I was on that bus to New Jersey, the bus to the lift to my hotel. But I was back in my hotel much earlier than I would have been anywhere else. And again, that's my own doing. That's me getting older and just not having the same energy that I used to. If I had done this 10 years ago, I would have been out all night and I would have gone with another 2 hours sleep. I would have slept on the bus ride in and out and I would have felt good. And that would have been enough. I definitely felt it this time, and I guess age comes for all of us, so I'm definitely feeling it after the show. Something I need to keep in mind for the future, I'm not 20-something anymore. My energy doesn't go nearly as far as it used to back then, so I really have to consider that when I book things and try to make the most of my time and be economical, that I may just be burning myself out way too early. And now for some quick fun. Let's look at everything I picked up at the show. So if you watched the last video, you know I picked up a blind bag at the DC booth, and I ended up getting this Daniel Warren Johnson foil variant of DC KO #1, and I did keep the bag in the end. So I mentioned I definitely did, and I stuck it in the bag and board here. But that was a pretty cool pickup. I did a whole rant on blind bags and all that. So if you want to check that out, that's still available. I'll make sure the link is available in the Substack, or I'll put the little link up here in a card so that you can watch that video if you missed it. So while I was at the DC booth, I also picked up this. So it's a issue of the Daily Planet where they sell you on the whole KO thing, which is really cool. I had to make sure to get this whole thing. There's also space for autographs and sketches on the back. And then on the inside is actually a bunch of comic strips. So it does kind of feel like that DC collection where they were doing the strips, but it was that big one where they had all the comic strips in it. But it's a free one. It's like an actual like newsprint comic strip Daily Planet, which I had to have it. It was really cool. I'm gonna throw that actually in a bag and board as well when I find one that's the right size, because it's just a smidge too tall. But I'm gonna find a way to secure that because I think it's really cool, even though it's just silly promo material. But I was very happy to grab that. I mentioned that I also went to the Marvel panel. That's where I met up with James, and I got a ash can for the Infernal Hulk. So they gave this to everyone that came into the panel. So I haven't opened it yet. I haven't taken a look, but it seems pretty cool. I'm so behind on all the Marvel stuff, including all of the Hulk stories. So I don't want to spoil anything. So I just haven't read it yet. But I was pretty happy to pick that up. Also, one of the people that I met at the Black Jacket Club, I said I wasn't going to name anybody, but I'm going to name Dan. Dan actually did a trade with me for his book. So very excited to read this. I said I'd read it on the plane, but given the nautical horror stories and the fact that we were caught in that nor'easter, I was getting a little squeamish about the idea of any kind of nautical horror when we were flying, over the ocean and over Lake Ontario at some point. So I decided to save it for later, but I will definitely be checking it out. That was a really cool trade. I was happy to get that. They're handing these out at the Chainsaw Man panel. It's really just a copy of Den and Geek, but the back page was what really sold everybody, and the way they're handing it out was that forward, even though it's just an ad. But take the freebies when you could get them. I like that piece of art anyway, which is based on the film that's actually coming out this week. So I do have a couple more comics, but I actually picked these up at Forbidden Planet. I did not pick them up at the con itself. I was actually having a hard time finding comics at New York Comic Con, which was silly. Unless I was going to pay for some crazy like $50 con exclusive, like I couldn't just find regular comics. And one of the ones that I was going to put on my pull list and I just forgot to was the first issue of The Punisher by Palmiotti and Dan Panosian. It looks really cool. I love The Punisher. I'm always checking out every new series out there. It's very hit or miss, but Palmiotti knows his Punisher, and Dan Panosian always gets my money. Every time he does a variant cover or anything like that, I'm in, and having them two together is something else. So that was an easy buy. And then while I was at Forbidden Planet, I've been really enjoying this whole heavy metal thing. I missed the Kickstarter. Shipping to Canada was intense, and by the time I decided I wanted to check it out, it had already come and gone, which was kind of a good thing. So I was able to pick it up, and as you could see here, it's been signed all over, which is pretty cool by some of the folks from the interior of the book itself. And actually, I was able to pick up a second issue with the same signatures on it. So that was pretty cool. I didn't get it signed myself, obviously. They weren't there when I was there. But it was still cool to get something a little bit extra, even given that I missed the Kickstarter. So that was a pretty cool pickup. So that's what I got comics-wise, but I actually got a lot more. I mentioned the panels. One of the panels I went to was Bob's Burgers. So I picked up this Bob's Burgers 300 pin, which was pretty cool. I've been really into pins since I went to San Diego and was collecting them just by accident. And then I ended up buying a Superman pin and all that. So now I have a collection of pins that now I make an effort to add to. So one of the things that I was able to get, well, two of them, was this New York Comic Con pin, which you can see here. And I actually got it with another one, and this one sold out. So I was really happy that I actually did the pre-order. They're neat. I just wanted some commemoration of going to New York Comic Con. That wasn't just, my badge, although I do keep those too, but I wanted something just to, for the first time there, I wanted something to commemorate it. I also got this free pin for Turtle Bread. They were handing these out. You would get them in the dispensers with the little like egg container. And this is the one I ended up getting. It was random. But hey, a pin's a pin. I will take it. The other thing I did, and I saved for right now, is I got this mystery set. So blind bags, again, talking about blind bags, and I haven't opened them yet. So these are New York Comic Con themed, like specific pin sets, which again, if you want to see the box here. So I picked this up. I haven't opened them yet, so I don't know what's in it. We'll do it together. Let's check out these blind bags. So pin number 1 is, oh yeah, it's a cat. It's like a witchy cat with the yarn. So that's pretty cool. All right, and there's 6 designs in total. I just went for one set. Whatever I got is what I got. So okay, let's open this live. Come on. I could be a little less precious with this than I was with the DC egg because I'm not putting them back in here. However, I'm having just equally as hard of a time. Okay, so this guy is, what is that? It's a skunk and a cupcake, I guess. Interesting. So not nearly as excited as I was with here's a perfect case of it. Cool pins, I guess. I don't know exactly what I was expecting based on all of the pins that are available. I guess maybe the pigeon would have been cool, but that's about it. Maybe the possum too. I could have done worse. I could have done better. So here we are. But yeah, that was my haul from New York Comic Con. So I did all right. I didn't get nearly as many comics as I expected to get. I like to chase after exclusives and things like that, but a lot of them weren't impressive in any way. Nothing really spoke to me. Nothing felt like I needed to get it right then, so I just didn't this time out, which is fine. So pretty decent haul, all things considered. So with that, let's talk about whether I'm actually going to end up back at New York Comic Con in the future. And the truth is, I'm leaning to no. If I'm being entirely honest, it was a great weekend. I had a lot of fun, but it was kind of stressful. This seems to be consistent with the past few conventions I've been to. My list of ones that I must go to are getting smaller and smaller. And unfortunately, I think just because New York Comic Con is in New York, that's really the reason. I don't know if I can justify going back. It was just so prohibitively expensive to be there in general that by the time I even got to the show floor, I was already thinking about pinching my pennies, and I didn't really even have time to relax and enjoy anything. It was just go, go, go. Also, I was exhausted. So having to stay all the way out in New Jersey, I knew that I had a long trip ahead of me. I took that long bus ride, and then the lift at the end of the bus ride, I had to stop at a Taco Bell and then get taken from there to the hotel, which was right off of the highway. So obviously you couldn't walk it. It was a lot. It was a lot, and that whole experience altogether kind of soured the actual show floor time that I had in New York. And for me, it really comes down to just weighing it. Would I rather do San Diego or New York? And when I look at it that way, the answer is easy. I'm going back to San Diego every single time. I loved going to San Diego. I'm going to try to go again in 2026. That is my goal. That is my plan. That is where I'll likely go every time I can. I even know more people out there, even though New York is only an hour and a half flight away from me here, and it's a 5-hour flight to San Diego. I seem to know more people in San Diego. So it's just a better time, a better weekend for me out there. So I think that's where I'm going to go. Plus, I love California. I could talk about that all day. I love going to California, even with all its flaws and all the bad things. And again, I'm a Canadian that visits, so I'm not feeling the day-to-day there. But every time I visit, I absolutely love going there, and I dream about going back. So it's easy sales for me. I'm going to San Diego. New York, unfortunately, I probably won't make an effort to go back. That said, if I can land a pro pass or I can do something to make the whole trip a little more worth it, a little more reasonable, I would do it. I would never say never. I would certainly go back in the right circumstances, but circumstances as they are, I don't think I'm going back. I might feel differently in a few years, but am I going to 2026? Probably not. That's an easy no. The goal is San Diego. I'm hoping to get tickets. We'll see in November if that happens. And then, of course, all the ones that I've been waitlisted for, including Calgary and Toronto and Fan Expo in Toronto as well. Hoping to return to the East Coast Comic Expo in Moncton, New Brunswick. So expanding the base locally as much as I can. I would like to check out a couple extra shows south of the border as well. I was told Terrificon is a great one to check out, so maybe that'll be on my list at some point. And then C2E2, which unfortunately is the same weekend as Calgary Expo, so it's hard to plan. If I'm planning Calgary Expo, it's hard to plan to also do Chicago, so that'll take some figuring out if that's going to happen. So going forward, I think I'm really going to slow down all the convention traveling I've been doing recently, just a bit. I really ramped it up over the past 2, 3 years, and I think it's time to kind of step back and really evaluate which are the ones worth going to. I'll go to a new one every once in a while just to scope it out, see if it's something I want to be at. And then if, of course, if I get invited to ones, that'll get put on the list. But in terms of me just going and attending or going and tabling, there's a lot of thought to be put into it. So much so that I'm going to talk about it on Saturday as part of the paid post. So we're going to talk about tabling, whether you should, whether you shouldn't, all of that business. But also, we're going to talk about the numbers behind it. So I'm not great at tracking exactly how much I sell of everything, but I do have a good idea of which cons performed well, which were bad, which had very high table fees, which didn't. So all of that business is going to happen behind the paywall, but we'll talk more broadly about all of it. And I'll even give you a conclusion before the paywall about whether you should attend or whether you should table or neither. So you'll know where I land on all of that. Of course, your mileage may vary. So if you're interested in that, come back on Saturday and check out that post. And then the following Wednesday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about writing in seasons. I already did a kind of a version of this in a very recent post, but this one is very writing specific because right now I'm kind of shifting my whole focus. We did an episode with the Word on the Street Con Journal where I talked about how I'm really starting to focus more on the book side of things while all the artists are doing all the comic stuff for now. And so for the next couple months, I think I'm going to be full on like author mode, at least until the new year. That's probably where my head's going to be at while I try to finish up some very important projects that I've already announced, including Switch Restart and Backlot Babylon. Those things are still waiting for the final sign off, the final completion. Switch Restart is a lot further down the line. Obviously, with it launching in January, I feel a lot more comfortable with that kind of where it's at, but it still needs some work to be exactly where I want it to be. And then Backlot Babylon is actually 3 books. I'm not planning on having them all completed by the time that the campaign launches, just the first novel. But knowing that I'm doing it as a series, there's some things I want to make sure that I line up properly and have the story exactly where I want it. So there's a lot more work to do, and I just haven't been able to focus on just writing in a really long time. So that's something I'm going to be doing. And then, of course, there's the launch of Big Smoke Pulp Volume 2. So all the authors have been notified. Contracts will be going out very soon if they haven't already, and we'll kind of have this solidified. The other thing I'm waiting on is the cover. I'm just waiting for the art to come back and be finalized so I can start publicizing that. But the pre-launch page is live with some temporary art. So if you haven't checked it out, please check out the pre-launch for Big Smoke Pulp. And with that, I'm going to let you go. I want to thank you for going on this ride with me and talking about all of the conventions all year long. This is the last one I'm going to do a con journal for. I'll be at Mississauga Comic Expo in November, but I'm going to be there with Roberto at his table. Like it's his event, and I'm just kind of sitting along with him. There is something cool that might be happening there with the Instant Ink Comic Book podcast, but we'll talk about all that on that side of things. And I'll definitely bring it up if we end up doing the cool thing that we want to do. But as far as these con journals and me talking about specifically like going to these events with networking and whatever in mind or tabling and selling and all that, this is the last one for 2025. But we have plans for other shows next year. I already listed them off for you. So a lot more to come. As always, I thank you for being here. We'll talk again very soon. Have a good one.